Welcome to the Legal CFO.
Welcome to the show where clarity meets profitability. This is the Legal CFO with Ryan Kimler, the founder of Net Profit CFO. If you're a law firm owner looking to get a handle on your finances, grow your bottom line, and finally take control of your numbers, you're in the right place. Each episode, Ryan breaks down the business side of law with straightforward strategies to help your firm run smarter, earn more, and scale with confidence. I'm Lisa Mosby, your host, and today we're talking about why growing revenue often fails to solve underlying financial problems in law firms. Welcome, Ryan. Thanks for coming back.
Absolutely. Excited to be here, and I love this topic. This is one of my favorites. Excited to dive in today.
Awesome. When the law firm increases revenue, but still feels financially strained, what does that usually tell you about what's happening behind the scenes?
Something in their systems is not profitable and scalable. One of the two, sometimes it's both, right? So meaning you could add $10 million more in work, you could add $100 million more in work, and it doesn't fix your core system or your core profitability, right? So I talk with my clients about this all the time when we're looking at making that next hire. Sometimes law firms can kind of fall into traps with bonus structures and things like that. And I always look at, is this hire profitable for the firm? Is this attorney going to produce the return that we're looking for? And is it scalable? Offering even just one attorney a bonus structure that's not scalable because you really, really want them at your firm, I would advise against, right? If we can't add 100 lawyers on that model, everybody wants to grow, everybody wants to scale. I think we have to do it in the right way. And if it doesn't scale, I think we should really look at not doing it.
Why do many firm owners expect revenue growth to fix cash, stress, or profitability issues? And why does that expectation often miss the real problem?
There is a thought that, we're adding more dollars in the door, right? And we're adding more revenue dollars to the top line. If we grow our top line, our bottom line is just going to grow with it, right? And that's definitely not always the case. Again, we really have to focus on efficiency. We have to look at how we're serving those clients. And you can go out and take on just a bunch of bad cases that you're really losing money on, right? And that's not going to do you any good. That's just going to suck up more money, right? A great example of that would just be not factoring in case costs, right? Maybe you've got to hire outside counsel, not factoring in those things, right? So it is absolutely possible, and I've seen this at firms, that you take on a case, and every case of that type that you take on and it's priced a certain way, right? You're losing money. By the time you factor in your staff's hours to complete it, right? Hours for intake, things like that. And sometimes, like I've got an immigration firm that I work with, they fully recognize we have a loss leader, right? In other words, we're selling this service at a really cheap price so that we can get the client in the door for other services. That's fine. That's acceptable, right? I do like to keep a good handle on what's our volume on that loss leader, because we can't just sell those, right? A loss leader where we're losing money every time we sell it, we don't want to scale that, right? If it's getting new clients in the door and that's working, that's fine. Let's measure it. But I have also seen situations where just not factoring our full cost, being priced too low, and maybe you take on 100 cases just for scale and just for round numbers. You take on 100 of these cases, you lose $100. Well, if you take on 1,000, right, it scales, right? You keep adding zeros and you keep losing more and more money. And so adding dollars to the top line, adding more sales does not always add to your bottom line. Again, we've really got to be set up with systems where we're efficient, and we've got to be set up where we know what return we're getting when we're signing that next batch of cases. not to mention the stress that we're putting on our staff, right? If they've got to produce more, um, we've got to keep in mind what their capacity is, because that could also lead to, again, just them being over capacity, and possibly bad client reviews too, right? If we're not delivering on a timeline that's acceptable. So more revenue does not solve your problems, right? I always love to get my owners, let's get to a place where you're profitable at a very strong percentage, at least 20%, right? So that means if we're selling $1 million worth of services, we have profits of 200,000 before we scale, right? Let's make it worth it to scale. Before we're going to add money to the top and add more work, let's make it worth it to scale.
So, Ryan, what financial issues tend to become more expensive or harder to fix as a firm grows and is producing more revenue, but they don't have strong systems in place?
Yep. I would say that definitely can be the case, really, with all three of the major expense buckets that I typically talk about. Number one, personnel, right? If you don't have a model down for how we hire people, the returns we expect, and them to be able to produce it, right? Keep scaling that, it just gets worse and worse, right? Add more people at a return that let's say you want a 3x return, and let's say your people are producing a 2x return, right, on their salaries. If you keep adding more and more and more 2x returns and we don't fix the model, that's not going to help, right? Marketing, also, second expense bucket that I normally talk about. If we're, again, if our case cost acquisition is too high, I really let marketing experts that I work with dive into all of that. But again, that doesn't scale either, right? If our case cost acquisition is really, really high, it probably doesn't make sense to go out and try to bring in 10 times more cases. Because that's, again, just going to drive up marketing costs when we weren't profitable with that to start with. And then the last thing is overhead, right? Again, going out and adding more people, more rent space, more computers, more machines, more software, probably a higher malpractice insurance cost because we've got more attorneys on the plan now, right? Healthcare, right? All of those overhead expenses are going to grow with the firm as well, right? And so those are the three major expense buckets that I like to put things into. That helps us really break out labor, marketing, and what I call, like what it takes to run a brick and mortar, right? You have your rent, your space, your supplies, all that kind of stuff, right? All three of those categories, if they're not right and they're not in check, and we don't have a proven system and model for them, scaling does not help us. That just adds more to the problem.
So we have the expense piece of it. I want to dive into the revenue piece of it. How does pricing structure or case mix choices contribute to the gap between the revenue growth and the real financial improvement?
Great example of this. So first of all, if we're not priced right to cover our expenses appropriately, we won't be left with a profit at the end, right? So let's start there. We've got to have a pricing model that really works, that provides us a return on our labor, a return on our overhead, all of those kinds of things, right? But then also to the second part of your question that I really want to get into is case mix matters, right? And like this would be an extreme example, but I think an example that people could relate to. We all have probably heard, the companies that handle traffic tickets really, really cheap, right? Like $50 or $100. A law firm doing 1,000 of those is a lot different than a law firm that handles 1,000 DUI cases that they're charging flat rate $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, right? So you could be a law firm that does both of those things, right? Maybe you handle the traffic tickets and maybe you handle DUIs, right? How your case mix looks, if you're bringing in 100 cases a month, how that's mixed, percentage wise, DUI versus traffic tickets makes a massive difference in your revenue. So for all the listeners that are out there, if you have more than one practice area, if there's more than one thing you do, right? Highly, highly, highly recommend go and look at, last year, and let's look at what your case mix was. How many did you open of each type of practice area, right? If that does shift as you move forward, it could really change revenue. Another great example would be a firm, let's say, that writes patents, but then also litigates them, like if somebody is trying to steal a patent, right? So one obviously would be a flat rate work. What doing the patent, right, most of the time is flat rate, versus the other one when they go to court is going to be billed on an hourly basis. And depending on how extensive court is, because I have a client that does this, court bills can be way, way more expensive, right? The initial patent, 8 to 10K, going to court could be 6 figures at times, right? Depending on how extensive it is. So again, case mix there, really, really, really important. There's a big difference between selling something that's $10,000 versus selling something that's $100,000. So highly, highly encourage all of my listeners, go back and just look at the different categories of cases that you opened last year inside of the different practice areas. And have that could also be a KPI, right? Of having that mix in your head of this is what we did over the course of a year. Did we do something this month that was close to that, right? There's going to be highs and lows and it's all going to kind of average out, but is it close, right? Because if it's not close, again, probably something to look at.
And we revamp that game plan every year. Every year, looking back at that caseload, looking back at that expense, the structure of our pricing, the cost of our personnel, all of those things. I want you to walk us through an example of a firm that chased revenue growth but didn't see financial relief, and what changed once the underlying issues were addressed.
Again, every firm that comes to me, I always want to look at what's happened in the last 2 years. And it's a little bit harder to catch this on the surface because both years were actually profitable in dollars. And they really had a good growth rate to their business. But percentage-wise, they got less efficient. They went from about 18% in profits down to about 16% in profits. So I really, really encourage all the viewers here, go look at what your profit dollars were and divide those by your revenue dollars, right? So again, if you profited 200K on $1 million, 20%, right? Really, really important KPI to track because it can look really good on paper, right? And as you grow the business, 20% of, say $1 million, you've got $200,000 in profits. Let's say you go to $2 million and it goes to 400,000. Well, it looks really good on paper, right? That, we had 200, now it's positive 400, right? Nothing wrong. Or it could be, maybe it's 390,000, right? Maybe it doesn't look like, oh, nothing wrong there, right? But you just lost a percentage point or two, right? And what is that being driven from, right? That's what we need to dive in and go look at when that happens. But that can definitely happen, right? It can look good on paper, positive profits. We have growth in both, growth in revenue and in profits, but percentage point wise, you actually lost a few. And so that means to me, efficiency wise, we lost somewhere, right? And maybe that's explainable. Maybe that's, hey, in order to grow, we had to hire another staff member and they're not fully, up to speed yet, right? That would be reasonable. But making sure that it doesn't stay that way is really important as well, right? Because losing those profit percentage points is not something that you want to do long term.
And you mentioned KPI or key performance indicators many different times. If a firm is focused on growth right now, what financial questions should the owner be asking to make sure revenue gains actually translate into stability?
definitely want to be watching that profit number for sure, and the profit percentage that I just talked about, because that's really where you're going to get stability long term, is when you're consistent in that profit number, that your business is really operating at an efficient level and you're producing. And then beyond that, the two other key expense areas that move the most is probably personnel and your payroll expenses, and then in your marketing expenses as well. Again, sometimes as you want to scale and take more market share with your marketing, it can get more costly than what you were doing before. And so monitoring those two things, and again, as you're growing, looking at percentages, right? If we're a growing law firm and I'm looking at the numbers, and last year we spent $1 million in payroll and this year we spent 1.5. Well, is that good or is that bad? I don't know, right? Because it's not relevant, right? Without having some other numbers to it. So that's why I really like looking at things on a percentage basis, right? So if I said, well, that $1 million last year was 48% of revenue, and the $1.5 million this year is 42%, I would tell you we got more efficient, right? So really looking at the numbers in context with other numbers. And that's why I also like percentages, because it tells more of the story. Did we get more efficient, right? It's not just about, well, did we go up in dollars and spend more? It's about, did we become more efficient and were we able to profit more?
Ryan, many business owners plan once a year at the beginning of the year. But how should firm owners maybe evaluate throughout the year or at a secondary planning meeting midway through the year to discover whether growth is helping or hurting their financial position in the short and the long term?
As you mentioned, annual plan, super, super important. And then I think it is really important to look at your numbers monthly. And I think for some things, there's got to be a runway, right? Again, making an investment, let's say $125,000 in a newer attorney to your firm, there's got to be runway there, right? They're not coming in day one and, here's 60 cases, go produce, right? That's not going to happen. There's got to be some runway. So I think looking at things quarterly and kind of reassessing, are we on track? Does this still make sense? Are we still planning to do the things that we plan to do, right? Because sometimes throughout the year, things change as well. Again, I think reassessing kind of on a quarterly basis, taking a little extra time beyond your normal just kind of monthly review, really, really important to look at. And if you need to adjust your plan, then that's a great opportunity to do so, right? But without adjusting that plan and without having some target numbers, it's really hard to know where we want to go. And it's really hard to judge against, are we doing well or are we not doing well? Well, that depends on where did we plan to go, right? It would kind of be like trying to shoot archery without a target, right? How close am I? How good did I shoot? Well, I don't know if we don't have a bullseye, right? So again, I think quarterly, really look at and assess, how are we doing? Where do we need to improve? That's a good time to do those reviews. So you probably have an annual planning time and then 3 quarterly check-ins beyond just your normal, hey, let's sit down, let's review the numbers, let's see what things look like.
Great advice today, Ryan. I think we'll leave it there.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Hey, thanks for listening to the Legal CFO with Ryan Kimler. If you're ready to get financial clarity for your law firm, visit netprofitcfo.com to learn more about working with Ryan and his team. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, share with another law firm owner, and leave a review, because the more you know, the more you grow. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.